that. When I was in the 7th grade, and that was in the mid-50s, I was really upset to learn that my English teacher, for the next 2 years, in fact, it turned out to be, was going to be Miss Helen Jenkins. Miss Helen Jenkins was known to be the strictest, toughest, meanest teacher in Wiley School. In fact, all the students who had ever had her talked about how tough she was, how strict she was. All the older students warned the younger students about Miss Helen Jenkins. Little hell, they called her. They said, pray you don't get little hell. She'll make your life hell. I was pretty sure that would be true because, as Mrs. Thorne had shown, teachers didn't like me. They enjoyed making my life hell. So that first day of class, I walked very slowly down to her room, just kind of dreading it. And there she was, standing outside of her classroom door. I soon learned that she stood sentinel every time classes changed. We got about a 10-minute break between classes, long enough for us students to go to the bathroom, get a drink of water, catch up with our friends. All the other teachers rushed to the teacher's lounge to take a few puffs off of a cigarette or sit down for a few minutes, but not Miss Jenkins. She stood there making sure we didn't escape. So she was scarcely over 5 feet tall, shorter than most of her students, but she had the presence of a 7-footer. And she was dressed in a much more sophisticated way than the other teachers. If the other teachers were more like Ma Kettle, Miss Jenkins would have been more like Jane Wyman. And in fact, she wore very expensive clothes, always wore cashmere sweaters, I thought, tailored suits. She had auburn hair, which she wore shoulder length and kind of a loose curls, a bob with loose curls, and was always very striking looking. In fact, I can remember one outfit in particular. It was a royal blue sweater set with a straight skirt with a kick pleat. And with her auburn hair, that made an incredible impression on me as a 7th grader. And she always wore high heels, of course. Even though she stood all day long and didn't ever sit down like some of the other teachers did. If we were doing classwork or doing tests, she was always circulating in the classroom, walking around, making sure we knew what to do and how to do it. And those heels gave her such authority. They gave her more height, of course, and made her taller. But just the sound of her heels walking on the well-oiled floors of Wiley School struck fear into my heart. In fact, hearing those heels come up behind me gave me the same feeling I get today when I see blue flashing lights in my building. But very quickly, my fear and dread of my classes with Miss Jenkins turned to a great love of her class. I couldn't wait to get to her class. I loved learning now. She made learning English grammar seem like the key to a successful and adult life. Yeah, sure. And if what we wanted when we were 13 years old was to be an adult. In fact, I can still remember the first time somebody called me on the phone, one of my friends, and said, "Can I speak to Dottie?" And I said, "This is she." Instead of what I would have typically said, "This is her," or "It's me." I felt I was really grown up at that point. I was on my way. So Miss Jenkins did a lot of Q&A in her classwork. She'd assign reading stuff for us, and the next day she'd ask questions about it. And I was so eager for her to know how smart I was. Where in other classes, like Miss Thorne and those other teachers, I was reluctant to put myself out there for fear of ridicule or fear of being wrong, and they'd make a big deal of it. But not Miss Jenkins. Every time she'd ask a question and I'd know the answer, my hand would go up and I'd jump up and down in my seat wanting her to call on me because I wanted her to impress her and I wanted to appear smart to her. And sometimes she would ask bonus questions. These were not things that would be in our reading, but they'd be things that touched on our reading, our study, so that had we wanted to pursue more, we might know it, we might have found out about it, or we might know it anyway for some reason. And if you knew the answer to one of these bonus questions, it meant you were really special. So one day she asked in our science class, she asked one of those questions. She said, "Does any of you know who discovered the circulation of blood?" Oh my God, I knew the answer to that. So I raised my hand, "Oh please me, call on me, call on me." And she called on every other person. And in the meantime, I'm going just like this, just like this. None of them knew, of course. And finally, when there was no one else and I'm still waving my hand in the air, she said, "Okay, Dottie, I said, William Harvey, all out of breath from all the physical exertion. She said, you're right, Dottie, you're right. Had I won the Nobel Prize that day, I couldn't have been more proud. I wanted to know everything about Miss Jenkins. I wanted to be just like her. And I admired her so much that I hung on to everything anybody could tell me about her. My father had the occasion to see Miss Jenkins occasionally in his work. And he would come home and he'd say to me, Dottie Jean, that's what he called me sometimes. He said, I saw your English teacher today. I saw your favorite teacher today. And she said something really nice about you. I said, oh, Daddy, what'd she say? What'd she say? He said, well, what's it worth to you? I said, oh, Daddy, I'll give up my allowance for a year. Promise. What'd she say? I'll read a book every day. What'd she say? These are all promises I knew Daddy would never ask me to fulfill. But he knew that to hear what Miss Jenkins, my English teacher, had said about me, I would walk across the burning sands of Sahara barefoot. And I called her my English teacher. But she also taught, as I said, science, and she taught the girls health and physical education. And as part of teaching us girls health, she schooled us in so many things. She taught us everything from the importance of wearing deodorant to how to make boys like us. In fact, about the latter, I remember what she said. She said, you know, it's easy to make boys like you. She said, all you have to do is make them think they're the smartest, wittiest, best-looking things you have ever seen. She said, and don't ever let them know you're smarter than they are. I thought, is that all there is? As the Peggy Lee song goes. Miss Jenkins also had a very sardonic sense of humor. But she never used it sarcastically to belittle us or ridicule us. She always used it to prod us on to doing better. She was our physical ed teacher, as I mentioned, so I remember one spring day in early spring, she took us, the girls, out to play softball. We divided up into teams, and I was out in the outfield between first and second base, and I was daydreaming, as I so often do. And one of the girls on the opposing team hit a ground ball, which I was daydreaming, completely missed. I could have gotten it so easily had I been paying attention. And I was so mad at myself, and Miss Jenkins yelled out at me, Dottie, are you out there to play ball or just getting your vitamin D? Oh, I was so upset. And I was mad at myself and mad that I looked bad to Miss Jenkins. So when we got up to bat, it came up my turn to bat, I was still angry and pouting, and I got up to bat and I was mad. She could tell, and she said, Dottie, pretend that ball is me. So I did. I slammed that ball really hard, and it was a home run. And I was running around the bases, and I crossed home plate, and Miss Jenkins was just sort of chuckling and laughing to herself because I had redeemed myself. I'm not the only person that was so affected by Miss Jenkins. I had the opportunity to talk to some of my classmates. We recently celebrated our 50th high school reunion. And to a person, those that I talked to, we all agreed that Miss Jenkins was the best teacher we ever had. And we all agree that we learned all the English grammar we ever learned from Miss Jenkins. We never had to relearn it. And several of us, we all know that she was very tough and strict. She gave an automatic D for a run-on sentence or an automatic D for a sentence fragment. But we learned it, and we developed confidence with the language, and we never had to feel ill at ease about using the language in grammar and what the rules were. I remember my classmate Binky Miller said that he had to have some special extra help in English when he was in the 7th and 8th grade, and Miss Jenkins gave extra classes every morning an hour before school started for anybody that needed extra help with any subject that English that we were doing at the time. He said he and Jimmy Brower went to those, but he said he learned it, and he never had any problems with English. He made A's all through high school, college, and seminary. And the same for another student, Judith, who said she had hated school until she had Miss Jenkins. She had skipped a lot. She'd done poorly, but she loved Miss Jenkins' class. Miss Jenkins had recognized that she could write and told her she needed to write for the school paper. And that sort of showed her something of who she could be, and that changed her entire life. Rose Post, a revered and prize-winning writer for the Salisbury Post, credits her success to Helen Jenkins, who encouraged her to write. My friend Dolores and I, we've been friends forever, and whenever we get together, we talk about Miss Jenkins and talk about what an influence she's been on our lives. We have been talking about Miss Jenkins for 57 years. Dolores liked to diagram sentences, and she said that she would diagram sentences for the fun of it. She'd go home, she'd read something, she'd pick up, she'd be diagramming sentences. In fact, I think a lot of people in Salisbury like to diagram sentences. If there was one of those maps, hotspot maps like they used to show demographics on television, Salisbury would pop up as a hotspot for diagramming sentences. And the commentators would wonder why. They said, what's going on in Salisbury, North Carolina, that so many people like to diagram sentences? But Miss Jenkins had great power. She had the best kind of power, which was the power to change people's lives and to recognize some gift they had and set them on a path to developing that gift. I've thought and analyzed many times what was it that made her such a powerful teacher. The first is she believed in her material and its relevance to our lives. She thought English grammar was important and would serve us well and help make us a success, and we believed it. The second thing is she was the most even-handed teacher I'd ever had. Other teachers had favorites or teachers' pets, you know. There'd be people from the affluent side of affluent families in town or the professional families, or there'd be just those really cute kids. And then the other kids, you know, they would kind of write off, or there were kids that they didn't see had any promise and they'd relegate them to the junk heap. Miss Jenkins didn't have pets or favorites, and she never relegated any student to the junk heap. The third reason, and I think is the most important reason she was so effective and so powerful, is that she served as a mirror of possibility for us. She recognized things that people were good at, students were good at, things that they might not even recognize themselves. And she would try to find some way for them to pursue it, whether it's writing for the school newspaper, any number of things she would do to try to help that student do what she saw that they had a gift for. In fact, Miss Jenkins was the first and only person that ever recognized that I might have a gift for comedic performance. She stopped me one day in the hall and she said, Dottie, she said, you have a great sense of humor. I've noticed you. She said, I think you have a good comedic sense. She said, I've recommended to Mr. Eisenberg, the principal, that you and a couple other students get together and write a comedy skit and that y'all perform it for one of the school assemblies. She said, I think you'd be great at writing and performing that. She wanted me to write and perform in a comedy skit. And sure enough, Mr. Eisenberg called a group of us, a few of us, to his office a few days later and said, Miss Jenkins wanted to do this, and to us to go off and write a skit and bring it back to him so he could see what we would do. So we did. We went away and we wrote a skit. This was in the 50s, mid-50s, and we were highly influenced by television. And the comedians dominating television at the time were Milton Berle, Jerry Lewis, and Red Skelton. They had broad, goofy, physical humor. Our skit was broad, goofy, and physical. In fact, it was about, we were selling a refrigerator, and everything we pointed out as a selling point for the refrigerator turned out to be a big botch-up. So we would say, you know, this refrigerator really freezes ice so well and so quickly. We take out an ice tray, and I know you know from Facebook what an ice tray is now, and we would, and we'd find that water would spill everywhere. It hadn't frozen at all, or the door would fall off of the refrigerator or something. Mr. Eisenberg sat there the entire time, and he didn't smile or didn't say anything. When it was over, he said, well, it will be impossible to get a refrigerator on the school auditorium stage. And that was it. But Miss Jenkins wasn't going to be deterred by Mr. Eisenberg. She announced that, a couple weeks later, she announced that we were going to have a talent show, just our class. It would be very informal and entirely voluntary. We were going to go to the school auditorium one Friday afternoon. Friday afternoons always had a little air of celebration. And we could each get up and do something we felt we were good at. We could play an instrument, we could dance, we could do a card trick if we wanted to, or we could recite a poem or whatever. And when she said it was voluntary, I was so relieved because there was nothing I could do. So we went to, so I decided I was just going to sit it out and just enjoy what everybody else did. So we went to the school auditorium and several people got up and did different things. Then I looked over at Miss Jenkins and she was really enjoying it. She was having a good time. And I thought, oh, this is another way to get her attention, to make an impression. And I kept trying to think, I thought, well, what can I do? What could I possibly do for this talent show? And I finally thought of something. So Miss Jenkins asked, she said, anybody else want to do something? So I raised my hand and she said, Dottie, surprise me. So I got up on the stage. It was that same auditorium stage, by the way, where Miss Campbell had told me just to move my lips. And I got up on that auditorium stage. I didn't feel like myself. I felt a little lightheaded and a little excited, but I wasn't afraid. And I looked out at the audience, and I saw my friends and classmates, and I saw Miss Jenkins. So I stood up there, and I opened my mouth, and I started singing. Well, now since my baby left me, I found a new place to dwell. It's down at the end of Lonely Street at Heartbreak Hotel. I looked over at Miss Jenkins and she was doubled over in laughter. So I just threw myself into that song. I put in some Elvis the Pelvis hip movements. Where I'll be so lonely, baby. I'll be so lonely. I'll be so lonely I could die. I want you to know that any other teacher in that school would have stopped my performance. Remember, it was 1956. People thought Elvis was a bad influence. Radio stations were burning his records. Churches were declaring him the Antichrist. Mrs. Thorne would have stopped the performance and said, Dottie, what do you think you're doing? This is entirely inappropriate. Take your seat. But not Miss Jenkins. She laughed, and she encouraged it. She gave me a mirror that day, a mirror of possibility into who I might be. I went on from that point through high school, college, graduate school, and the business world, where there were no mirrors like her. But when I got to be 65 years old, I took out that mirror, and I looked at it again, and I got that itch to get up on the stage, open my mouth, and make people laugh. Miss Jenkins was my mirror of possibility. Thank you, Miss Jenkins.